I've had to talk to foreign affairs quite a fair bit, and I found that no matter what question you try and ask them, they always say, oh, in case we can't get back to your question, can you send us, can we have your email? And then at the end of the day, 5 minutes before the deadline, they send you the same form email that you've gotten for the last 20 times, 30 times you've asked a question with one word changed to whatever the current situation is. Specifically, anytime Canadians, I had to do this for Japan, for Egypt, anytime Canadians were involved, it was the same form letter. And I'm wondering whether there's any kind of way legally that we can get around or something so that they actually have to answer the question rather than using a form.
You can file access to information. I don't want to be too negative here. I get lots of great stories from access to information. It's just that the hit rate is going down. It probably takes me 10 requests to get one story, but it's a story, and it's you don't want to despair too much, and you want to encourage other journalists to use it, and it does work. It just now it takes a little longer and it takes a little more application.
But also, your question as well is, can I compel a politician to answer my question, to do it directly? Or bureaucrat. And the evidence to date, and I've been in this business a long time, is no. But the fact that a politician will not answer a question is in itself an answer and a story. And what you need to do is to be very, very, you need to be sharp and detail-oriented in the way you put your story together, because you need to list when you've made a request for information, what you heard back, when you heard it. The fact that you didn't get an answer until a few minutes before that office closes and your deadline now needs to become a part of the story.
We started doing that at the current one season. Every time we asked for a cabinet minister to speak and we were told no, we still do. We put it in the, we started keeping count, but we also put it in the extra. The other thing is, if they give you, and Foreign Affairs does do this, they'll give you a statement that's 4 paragraphs long. Well, I'm under no obligation to give them that kind of airtime. They don't want to speak to me, they don't want to answer a specific question, then you have no obligation to use a pro forma statement. And that's, if they're going to do that, then you can do your journalism in a different way. There are many ways to cover a government. They will make it difficult.
Hi, my name is Janet Butler. I'm a former civil servant and now work in international nonprofit human rights communication. My question has to do with the G8 spending report, what I understand was a fairly unprecedented leak. Do you expect that we'll see more leaks like that, given the current climate? And do you have any comment on what should or should not have been done with that report, given that there was a federal election and the report had not been released?
How about the Ottawa Bureau guy answer that one?
That report was leaked to the Canadian press, who I work for. It came in the heat of an election campaign, so it was tainted. It came from someone in the Liberal Party. So the question is, should it have been released? I say yeah. Of course. We identified the source. The reader could make up his or her own mind about whether it was too tainted to be believed. But it turns out that the material was confirmed in a later leak. In fact, the government leaked its own report later to try to exonerate itself, and I think it just dug itself in deeper. So, brown envelope journalism, you take what you get, you examine it, you make a call on it, you give the reader as much context as you can, and we're not in the business of covering up information. We're trying to make it widely available. Should it have been tabled in Parliament? That's a legal issue. I'm not really sure what options were available to the government. I don't know.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Vieira. I'm a graduate student at Ryerson's Journalism School. I'm glad that he asked the question of what to do once information comes blackened out. from the government, but I want to you to answer one step prior to that, which is, what can the government legally not give you once, let's say it's a public document, some sort of report that's legitimately public? What parts of it exactly can the government not give you? For sure, names and social insurance numbers. But when it comes to national security information, where's the line of what is on the government's discretion to give you and not give you on that blackout? And then what can you say, oh, this is illegal for you not to give me, I'll call the commissioner?
The rule is that there are 13 reasons for information to be blanked out in the Act. National security is one, and there's a whole range of others. So there are these 13 reasons. Generally speaking, each time you get your document, there should be an indication as to what part of the Act is being used to cut something out. Your only recourse when you get something like that is to go to the Information Commissioner and say, has the Act been applied properly to this document? I want you to check all of the redactations so that I will know that the law has been properly implemented. The Information Commissioner can see both the original document and the redacted document, and the Information Commissioner can make a decision. If the Information Commissioner determines that some of that information should come out and the government disagrees, then the next step is to go to court. When I was the commissioner, what I would do is I would write to the person involved and I would say, you now have the right to go to court. But if you give me permission, I can go to court on your behalf. And we will see what the court decides. And so it's the court that eventually determines what comes out under that kind of legislation. Now, I said there were 13 exemptions in the Act, but the one that is used most often is not in the Act, and it's known as the 14th exemption. It's called embarrassment. The rule is that because it may embarrass me or my colleagues or the department, it shouldn't go out. So that's the big one that you fight.
But that's illegal.
But it's illegal. But often they cover it by using some of these other sections.
National security.
National security is a big one. And, you know, the national security is one of the more difficult ones because it's very difficult to make a judgment as to what's national security and what's not. And so there's a tendency for that to grow. And some of the more difficult times that I had were when we were trying to narrow the national security, particularly after 9/11, when almost everything that happened was national security.
Maybe I could just add one more point. One of the kinds of documents that's right off the table are cabinet documents. And we talked about the 20-year rule. So you can start to see some cabinet documents if 20 years has passed since their creation. But before that, those documents aren't even covered by the Act. They're excluded rather than exempted, okay? So, very convenient for government, cabinet documents not available. The other interesting thing about cabinet documents is that the commissioner can't look at them and make his own decision about whether they really are cabinet documents. If they've been declared a cabinet document, even the ombudsman of the system can't see them. Now, I talked before about this government exploiting loopholes in the Act. That's one of the loopholes they've exploited. They have widened the definition of a cabinet document beyond what it was before they came to power. It's so broad now. If one minister communicates with another minister about something that may someday go before cabinet, it's a cabinet document. And this broad range of documents is just expanding daily. And as I said, the beauty of it is that the Information Commissioner can't jump in, examine them, make his or her own determination about whether they really are. So it's a beautiful loophole, and we see it more and more. It's called a Section 69 exclusion, and we see it more and more often. Things that were easily accessible 10 years ago have just disappeared now. They're declared no longer under the Act.
I wonder if I could just add before we finish. I don't want to leave any of you with the impression, and I don't speak for anyone else here except myself, that I think there shouldn't be laws of privacy that extend including to the government. Our governments need to be able to do some business in private, particularly, I mean actually it's not particularly today. Throughout history, governments have needed privacy in order to protect its citizens. I am not calling on government to release wholesale and without thought every document generated by our government. I don't like us to be painted as zealots who have no respect for the safety of our country. What I'm saying is there is a law, it's not being followed, and the sorts of responsible disclosure that we're asking for come with, as well, from the working press, the promise that we will use the material responsibly. It scares me that as this becomes more of a polarized, almost an information war, that it looks like all we want is to publish anything we get, e.g. WikiLeaks, and increasingly that's justification for a government to hold ever tighter onto every shred of evidence, piece of information that they have.
I'd like to point out, however, that WikiLeaks may actually have more of its power from the fact that increasingly governments everywhere have clamped down. WikiLeaks wouldn't be the phenomenon it was if governments were releasing information. If you even look at what's come out of WikiLeaks for the US government, first of all, none of that was top classification. It was about 3 tiers down. It was alternately dismissed as nothing new and grabbed onto as really interesting tidbits. But I think one of the reasons that people got so excited about WikiLeaks, and not just in the United States but in other areas, was that the fact that governments all over the world think that too much information is, that they just don't want to give us even the basic information. So any scrap becomes a big deal.
Now, you should remember that WikiLeaks, when it did the U.S. stuff, this was not as big a leak as in my day when we had the Pentagon Papers.
Exactly.
I mean, this was really small beans compared to that, because that blew the whole Vietnam, the whole Nixon administration, the whole Johnson administration up. So these were really small things. They were not the significance of the brown paper bag.
But that's the environment you create, as Anna Maria is saying. That's exactly what happens. You refuse to give people even the basics to which they're entitled, and this is the extreme that continues.
The other thing, when it comes to national security, I used to work in Israel, which, regardless of what you think of the politics of Israel, Israel has a very aggressive media. The place is a sieve. Like every bit of information gets out. Every Israeli journalist holds the government to account on national security issues, on big fat issues that we here think we shouldn't talk about. And if they can do it, we can learn from Israeli reporters in terms of the kinds of information they've held their own government's feet to the fire on. If you look at, so you have to remember that the whole idea of access to information is not whether we use it responsibly, it's whether they are held to account. The whole idea is whether people with power and influence can be held to account with what they do. And what you see, in fact, is with the manipulation of information. Look at what happened in the Iraq War. And even the sourcing that came from, remind me the name, it's gone out of my head, the New York Times reporter. No, the woman, Judith Miller.
Yeah.
Judith Miller was protecting a source who was using his power and influence to get the person without the power and influence. The laws were never made for people of power and influence to turn around and use them on the people without the influence. The laws were made to keep those with the influence to account. And we're twisting that. And we're saying that we're the problem when in fact we need that information so that we can judge the decisions that are made in our name.